Good evening, Jai Guru. Pranams to Jayaji and a warm welcome to Jayaji for this Kolkata Satsang. Jayaji, it's a blessing and an honor for us to have you with us after a long time for a Satsang. And thank you for, it's morning. Jayaji's in America. It's early morning there, about 6:30 a.m. So we are very grateful for your time, and with that, I request you to start the satsang.
Well, thank you so much, Diti, and thank all of you there in Kolkata. It's been far too many years, I think, since I've been visiting there, and I only do satsang from time to time. So I apologize if I'm not a familiar face, perhaps, to some of you. But my name is Nayaswami Jaya, as Diti very kindly said. And I'm very happy to be with you. And I don't mind getting up early in the morning. Actually, I enjoy it because I know I have something to get up for. And so to get up, it's a spur to me to be able to get up early and to come to share with you today. Actually, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be returning to India. This COVID situation has thrown difficulties into everybody's lives and restrictions and whatnot. So I'm in America right now, but I hope to be back in early February, second week of February. So perhaps I'll see some of you in Pune and wherever else I may be. So anyway, today we're going to have a satsang. And I'd like to share some thoughts with you on a topic that has been of interest to me, and I'll explain that in a little bit when we get time for that. But the first thing, let us start with a prayer. Let's invoke the presence of the Masters. Let's invoke the presence of Divine Mother to join us this morning, or this evening in your case. So let's pray together. I'll pray. Divine Mother, Heavenly Father, beloved friend, God, great masters, gurus of Kriya Yoga, of self-realization, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashai, Swami Sri Yukteswar, and our beloved Guru, Paramhansa Yogananda. Saints of all religion, we humbly bow to you all. Divine Mother, light the fire of thy love in our hearts. Tempt us not with all the worldly delusions, but ever keep us close to thee, tied to thee. Let us not wander far, Mother, lest we wander and be lost once again. Now that we have thee close, Mother, stay with us always. Take us into thy lap, Mother. Bathe us in thy light and love. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. And I think now let's I'll start with a meditation. And I wanted to talk this morning about an aspect of God. In this case, I saw the title was happiness, but I need something more than happiness. Let's talk about joy and its aspect and how it has a certain meaning to me at this particular time in my life, and I'd like to share that with you. But in order to get us started, I'm going to play this chant, simple one. I think most of you know. I have my harmonium down here. So I'll maybe put my original sound on here. Get my computer on. Okay, that's even better. That's an easy one. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again, from Master's poem Samadhi. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred sacred joy I live again. From joy I came, for joy I live. In sacred joy I live again. From joy I came, for joy I live. In sacred joy I live again. Now let's sit up and meditate. We can meditate for about 10 minutes or 5 or 10 minutes. Let's sit up. Let's inhale. Let's take a nice deep breath. Inhale through the nostrils. Double breath. Tense the whole body. Now let the air out with the double breath. And at the same time, release tension. Let's do that once more. And throw the breath out. Releasing the tension. Now breathe deeply, taking a deep breath with a double breath, but no tension. Just hold it. Hold the breath. Concentrate your gaze upward to the point between the eyebrows, and with your gaze fixed there, keeping it there, gently let the air out slowly through the nostrils. And then when the breath wants to come back of its own, let it come and breathe naturally without control. Feel the breath coming in to the body through the nose, going out, taking in life and vitality, light and joy, taking away all tension, disturbance, restlessness as you exhale. Keep the gaze uplifted and then look into the spiritual eye. Imagine a light there, a joyful presence. Feel God's presence there as joy. Calm, radiating, filling you with the stillness and peace. Absorb ourselves. Let us in that light. If you wish, you can call to the Divine Mother, Mother, come out of the darkness, bathe us in thy light. Om. 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 Well, welcome again back. I hinted that I wanted to speak about a topic that over the last several weeks I've been with our online team with Ananda Sangha. We've been recording a series of classes on Wednesday morning, my time, Wednesday evening, your time, on the topic of joyful living. And my mind has been rotating around that topic of joy, happiness, God as an expression of those two. And because of that, that's why I think this topic that we chose this topic for this satsang this evening. But I'd like to just explain something about that. Is some years ago, I was asked a question at one of the classes that I was doing, and I think it was in Pune at that time. And I think it was in about 2007, so it would have been 15 years ago. And I've given hundreds and hundreds of classes, and I've answered many more than that questions over the years too. And I tend to forget what it was. I can't remember one class so much from the next, but I remember this particular question and answer session because a person asked me a question that has stuck with me. Not so much the question, although that was there, but the thoughts that went through my mind when I was asking that question. And they've been, you could say, a central thought in my mind that keeps coming back to me. And I ponder on it. And this has been over the last 15 years. And finally, I thought, well, I'm going to do a class series on that. And that's what I'm doing with the online. And we're in the midst of that. And the question was this. I was giving a normal beginning class series, an introductory lecture about Kriya Yoga, these teachings of self-realization, Paramhansa Yogananda. And at the conclusion of it, like we normally do, we have a question and answer session, or often do. And a person asked me at that time, very jokingly, he kind of asked, "Oh, you've been practicing these things for a long time. Show me your powers." Now, it was a bit of an audacious question, but it was said in good fun. And so I chuckled and I told him, I says, "Well, I don't have any powers." Because he was looking for Siddhi type things. And I said, "I don't have those." And then I paused a moment, and it was in a moment of an intuitive insight. I says, "But I think I have one power. I can choose to be happy when I want to." And then I asked him, I says, "Can you do that?" And we went back and forth a little bit, and everybody had a lot of fun with that question. And we went on with it. But after the class, and actually during that question and answer session, one of the comments I made was, "I have that power, but why don't I always use it?" I don't always choose. And isn't this true? I think all of you too. You have this power, but do you choose to use it all the time? Something happens in your life, and you get angry. You have chosen on some level, you've chosen to allow yourself to get angry. Now you might say, "Oh, I didn't choose that. It was just a natural reaction to my life." But no. On some level, you allowed that. And by your allowing yourself to become angry, to become jealous, to become sad, to become discouraged, it's not the fault of whatever outward circumstances. Those were neutral, as Paramhansa Yogananda says. Circumstances in this life are neutral. We're angry, we're happy, we're sad, according to our own reaction to that. And so on a deeper sense, we could say, "I didn't have anything to do with it, it just happened." Or you might think, "Isn't that how I should feel? Wouldn't you feel the same way if that happened to you and you got disappointed or angry or insulted? You respond in the wrong way." And there's a sense that I feel obligated to feel a certain way, even some people might say. But on the very deepest level, I think if we allow that to happen, we have choice. And now some people, of course, maybe they've never, they've lived a very unhappy or sad life, but I think everybody's felt happiness at least in some point in their life. But some people maybe have not really felt joy in their life. And so I was using happiness as an example of something I could choose because it was a public audience, a general audience. It wasn't necessarily an audience of people who understand spiritual teachings, but they must have a little bit to have come to a lecture such as that. So consequently, for a very mixed audience, I used happiness because everybody can understand what happiness is. And so looking back on it, I was really just using happiness as a doorway to really speak about joy. I could have said, I have the ability to be joyful if I so choose. I have the ability to be calm. I have the ability to be peaceful. I use these as happiness as an example for something much more deeply, because happiness everybody could experience, but I'm not sure. Maybe some people don't choose to be calm, for example, if they are in a very disturbing situation. They get thrown off center, they become angry at something. Maybe they don't know what calmness is, but I do. I know what calmness is. I've been calm. I've been very calm at times. And I have that feeling of inner calmness that comes with grace. I felt what joy is like. So I can't say that I do not choose them because I don't know what they are. And I ask you too. I think most of you, all of you, to some degree have had a taste of what joy is like. Deep inspiration, deep love, perhaps a desire for God, calmness. These things are things we've experienced, I suspect. And yet, when the situation comes up that we can be pulled in another direction, do we choose those things? Do we choose those? At a moment's notice. I'm not saying once in a while, but why don't we choose them every moment? Yogananda said a very interesting thing in his autobiography. He said, at any moment, you can summon up joy, deep joy, the joy of God. Because in all of these things, what we're talking about is why not choose God at that point? When you can summon up the joy of God at any moment and recognize it and infuse your consciousness with it, you will be guided rightly in your actions. Whatever even in the details, he says. Now, that's an interesting thing to say because people are always saying, well, what do I do? What do I do now? What do I do? I don't know what the right thing to do in life. And of course, do any of us really know what that is in our heart? And we're always searching. And so how do we know? We contact that deep joy of God. We contact God. Not the giddy happiness, you might say, of a new possession, but that deep inner joy that doesn't change. If we can learn to recognize that within ourselves, we summon it, and then we find that we're guided rightly. But yet, I asked myself, and I thought, I know that, but why don't I always choose it? I allow myself at times to become distracted, and this is why I pray to Divine Mother, don't tempt me, Mother. Please don't tempt me. Because I know I'm not beyond temptation to be drawn into delusion here or there, even though I know better. And I think all of us, I'm projecting that on you. I think it's true that all of us here, because we're here at this satsang, we know better than to get drawn into these things. And we become, you could say, we allow ourselves to be victims of circumstances, victims of stormy weather, and and then we get into some reaction against those things, and we say, I can't help it. And that's exactly true. we have no control over our reaction to what happens to us in our life. And you could say that, well, whose fault is that? It's our fault. We have not developed that control to resist those things outside of ourselves, and not only to resist them, to put ourselves into the right direction. You know, there's a quality that is mentioned on the spiritual path, a very important one, which goes with this very dilemma that we find ourselves in. It's called Vairagya. And you could say translated, it could translate a number of ways, but I would use the one dispassion. You know, that's often what was used. Vairagya is dispassion, but I don't quite like that translation either, because what does dispassion imply? Dispassion, well, I'm not going to feel anything. You see, I'm not going to be passionate about anything. Dispassion, non-passion. So I'm not going to be passionate about anything. So the people interpret it as, well, I'm not going to enjoy anything in this world because I might get tempted to get off track. And there are and that's true too. I mean, we know that, you know, and so dispassion is interpreted in that negative sense of just holding at bay all of life's distractions to us, and that is not really how Master would look at life, although it does have some validity to it. There are sadhus who are, you know, just absolutely dispassionate, and many practices this way, sitting in the sand, surrounding yourselves with little fires, you know, and being beyond sensory distraction. This is a power, and it's something we do. It can be helpful to develop that. There's a story of I'm reminded of that Swami Kriyananda, my teacher and direct disciple of Paramhansa Yogananda. Some of you perhaps had the blessings to meet him or know him or hear of him. Hear one of his talks. He passed in 2013. He was very much engaged in this world with enjoyment. He loved beauty. He said it was probably a memory from past lives in the astral world, but he just loved color. He loved beautiful music. He was a musician himself. He could do art. He could do these. The arts were important to him in life. Because he enjoyed the good things in life, the beauty in life, and he encouraged that. And he felt Master Yogananda was like that too, to be embracive of the beautiful things of life. Yeah, but there is this path of dispassion and say, no, don't go that way because you're going to get enmeshed, which is also true. But we have to develop that ability to enjoy, like the duck or the swan. The water hits it and it just rolls off of it. But Swamiji Kriyananda one little quirk in his life, which is not something one advertises, but when he would go to the dentist, he would never take Novocaine or pain deadening medicine when he would go to the dentist. He would get a filling done. And have you ever gone to the dentist? You've all been to the dentist, I'm sure. It's uncomfortable, somebody working in your mouth there. And usually it says, oh, we got to fill a cavity, we have to drill it out. And you go, oh no. But he gives you a pain deadening, Novocaine, to deaden the pain. Well, Swami never took Novocaine because he said that he didn't like that dead feeling. And it was just a discipline, I think, also himself. So he'd allow the dentist to drill, without the pain relief. And he would do this regularly whenever he went to the dentist, never used Novocaine. And I tried it once, I remember as a little boy remembering the dentist being painful. And so I always took that pain relief. But then I tried it once and, oh man, was that painful. But try it, you'll see. But he would not, because and what he would say was that he would put his mind elsewhere. And it wasn't, but you see, being dispassionate in that sense was that it wasn't that he didn't feel. And this is what many people think. Well, to be dispassionate, I shouldn't feel anything in this world. And so they put up a barrier to life, and they become, by numbing themselves, you see, like the Novocaine, I'm not going to feel it. And that's not what dispassion is about. And that's not what a yogi does. A yogi feels deeply. Now, coming back to Swami, he felt the pain of the dentist drilling in his teeth. But he said what he would do, he would dissociate himself from the body. He would just observe it. It was just sense, and as he would say, he says, look upon it as simply sensation. It's a sensation. But why identify the sensation as pain or suffering? It's just a sensation. So he said what he said he would, in his mind, he would just watch it and see that it was sensation. He said he would think about his writing or something he was composing, music he was composing, and he would mentally put his mind on that. And then it would be done. Now, one instance, he went to the dentist, and the dentist said, well, this tooth, it can't be saved. Have you ever been to the dentist and had a root canal? So he says, I'm going to have to do a root canal on your tooth here. He says, it's going to be very painful. And Swami says, no, I don't take Novocaine. So no, just go ahead. And the doctor almost refused to do it. He says, no, it's going to be too painful. You've got to take this Novocaine. And Swami says, no, you're the dentist. I'm the patient. I have a right to choose. And I'm not going to take the Novocaine. So the dentist starts doing it, and he starts doing the procedure. Now, that's painful. And Swami said, he said that was a little bit more challenging. He admitted that. It was a little bit more challenging, but he said one of the things that I felt bad about the whole thing is I was looking at the poor dentist, and the dentist was, perspiring because he knew what he was doing. And the dentist finally reaches in there and he pulls the nerve out, and he shows it to Swami when he pulled the nerve out. And the dentist was pale, you might say. And Swami said, well, when it was done, it was over, and the pain went away. Now, I don't necessarily suggest you do this, but the principle of it applies. We want to be able to detach ourselves enough so that it's not the outer. We don't want to numb ourselves to what's going on in this world. That's not the way to overcome suffering, through numbness. We have to, you could say numbness takes us down underneath. We want to go above, rise our consciousness above and detach. This is the body happening. Or more, you might say, to the point, it's just emotional reactions happening. It's circumstances that are unfavorable to us. Now, I know this sounds very airy and philosophical, but there's a truth to it. Now, this is one approach. But Swami really, and when we come back to this word dispassion, he said, people don't understand. This is what Yoganandaji said. Dispassion has another side to it, and the real understanding of dispassion is putting one's attention so focused upon the love of God that none of these other things bother us. To be so engrossed in God, where can suffering be? Where there is joy. Where joy is in your heart, there's no place anymore for suffering. And this is the story, of course, I told at my class series about Saint Rabia of Basra many hundreds of years ago. Maybe, I can't remember when she lived, but it was a long time ago. And she was on her deathbed, and her disciples, 3 of her disciples came, and the first asked, he says, oh, mother, you're suffering so much. He says, it pains us to see your suffering, which she was, I guess, whatever her malady was, it was painful. And one of the disciples says, Mother, one is no true lover of God. This was meant as a compliment to her. One is no true lover of God who is not willing to suffer for God's sake. And Rabia wouldn't accept that. She said, that sounds like egotism to me. Because it's like, I am suffering for God's sake. And people sometimes think like that, don't they? Oh, I'm such a saintly person, and look at my holiness. I'm suffering for God. But what are they talking about? They're talking about suffering. Does that equate with God consciousness? Well, then, so she says, that sounds like egotism to me. And so then the second disciple says, well, Mother, let me rephrase that. One is no true lover of God who is not happy to suffer for God's sake. And she says, well, that's a little better. And then the third one says, well, Mother, you tell us, who is a true lover of God? He says, a true lover of God is one who is able to forget one's suffering in the contemplation of the divine beloved. And that's what we want to do. This is what dispassion really is to have such deep love. Dispassion, well, that is dispassion for egoic expression of one's love. But with true love of joy in the focus of one's attention is also the higher side of dispassion. And the other approach of the other detachment from oneself, the fruit of that to truly be godly dispassion is to love God so deeply that there is no place for anything else in one's heart. And so this is the prayer I offer to God often. He says, Mother, fill my heart with love for thee. Lead me not astray, Mother, only light that fire of love in my heart. And this is what we need to do. But of course, that's a high goal. But what if we don't have that? Well, we have to step that down. Life doesn't have to be a series of reaction to the trivial things in life that we get upset about. I think most people are too sensitive. Littlest thing, they get angry, they get mad. You go to the grocery store, and see that, I enjoy actually sometimes going to the grocery store just to observe the day-to-day hubbub, lots of people doing, and all the little parents and children and the interactions. And sometimes you see people get so angry over the silliest thing, and the boy at the counter, doesn't understand or gets something wrong, and the customer, gets all upset. Why? We blunder in this type of reaction to minor trivia. We blunder from one mess in our lives to another. Pain and suffering. That's why we don't want to do that. We don't be caught up in the emotions of the moment, and to be able to step back and simply observe. That's why we meditate. That's why we practice Kriya Yoga, to be able to control our energy, our emotional energy, to be able to hold it back and watch and control it. Doesn't mean numbing yourself, though. You see, it means control it so that we can direct it upward to something higher and enjoy the moment. Sometimes in the grocery store, I see these things going on, and I feel a real joy in my heart. An odd place to, the temple of the grocery store. I feel this joy coming up in me, and I see these human interactions, all this, I feel a little compassion too for people. why be like that? I'm going to just be, and go about projecting that joy if I possibly can. I'm going to choose it, you see. And we have to choose it. The mark of an immature person, and this is not just spiritually, it's just immature in life, a baby or a young person, unfortunately, many adults as well, is a lack of impulse control. I can't control my impulses. I live on a roller coaster, emotional roller coaster, up and down, and I'm just hanging on. Life is driving me. It's like we're become slaves, like life is whipping us from one emotion to the next. And why? Why? We can't control that, but it starts in the little things in life. And it starts, again, it has two sides. One, watch yourself, control yourself, be master of yourself. And the other thing is, so consequently, you have to put a little fence around your emotional reactions to life. But that's only half of it. You have to approach it from both sides. Don't let little things bother you, little slights, little disappointments. Don't be overly sensitive. Toughen yourself up, in other words. The ego is so fragile. Toughen it up again. And it's a preoccupation. If you don't have impulse control, if you get upset easily, it's a meaning that you're preoccupied with your own ego. That's what oversensitivity is, emotional oversensitivity. But that's only but the core isn't to just build a fence and hide. It's to have that other side as well, the deep love of God. You take, instead of your focus being on this or on that, we have to focus it on what's really important. We focus on our attention to God. So it's always this dynamic of the stronger our love for eternal verities, the less these things, that these passing fancies will attract us. How do we do that? Of course, that's the path of yoga. That in the autobiography, Master says, when he was young, he was guided, his will was guided by whims and fancies. I like that, whims and fancies. Yep, I could see that. We're guided by whims and fancies. But he says, when I attune my will to that of my guru, Yukteswarji, Sri Yukteswarji, his God-guided will, wisdom-guided will, when I attune myself to that, then it's when he said I really began to make spiritual progress. Now, I think he was being modest, but nevertheless, the principle is true. And so it's, again, whims and fancies, no more for me to the degree I can, but then attunement of ourselves, calling to God, Divine Mother, or, as I like to think of it, Divine Mother in the form of my Guru, Master, tune my will to my teacher, Swami Kriyananda, and that way we approach it from both sides. So don't let little things bother you. And you could sort of think of this life as a dentist shop, drilling, and or you might think of also as human consciousness is like an ocean. An ocean, we ride on the surface of the ocean. And what do you find on the surface of the ocean? We ride on the waves. And that tends to be where our consciousness or awareness is centered, in the emotional reactions of the world, around the waves. But when you dive deep beneath the waves, you go deep, we can identify with the ocean depths, not the waves. But this comes from practice. And this is why, again, coming back, we practice. This is what we're trying to do. when we meditate, we put our efforts, we attune ourselves with our guru, the guru's teachings. And what does he say? He says the gurus, the masters of our path, have come into the world to give us techniques to be able to dive down deep below the waves, to be able to experience that. And that's what the spiritual path of what we're trying to do is go beneath those waves, meditating, and then bringing that calmness, choosing calmness, and bringing it back into our daily life, bringing it back into our action, and to the degree we can, recalling it moment to moment during life while we're being tested by circumstances. That's what circumstances are. They're just, you could say, Divine Mother's test to see if we can actually pass that test. You have to, life is, it doesn't happen without our will engaged in this. We have to choose this, you see. And choosing, I've been talking about choosing happiness, choosing calmness, choosing joy. But let's really, for me, those are euphemisms for choosing God. We have to choose God. God's not going to come and pass it. God does come to us, but we have to, choosing God, is an affirmative action. God is there for us. Seemingly God hides, but there's a bit of testing to see if that's really what we want. It's not going to make it easy for us, but we have to choose. We have to be affirmative. We can't just go along and hope that God comes to us someday and picks us up. We have to reach our hand up before God reaches down. But God is reaching down, but we cannot be passive. We have to reach up. So it's an affirmative action. And God waits to see to what extent other things are going to tempt us. Do we really want God more than being angry? That seems to be very simple, but I think some people really rather be angry. They'd rather be jealous. They'd rather be depressed. It seems to me. Now, logically, that doesn't make any sense, but emotionally it does. There's a certain dark joy to being upset. It's satanic in a way, but there's a certain pleasure that comes with it, and it's dark. You have to not go that way, but that takes time, and God will test us until we find out, he finds out, she finds out that no, I'm not going to be sad. I'm not going there anymore. I've learned my lesson. God's grace. I'm not going to go there. And when God is satisfied, then God's grace reaches down for us. But the hand is there always. It's not that they're withdrawing it, but we have to come to the point where we really, this is what I want. And when we want that, then all of these other things don't tempt us anymore. That's what true dispassion has, that element to it. There's in the Bible, in the Old Testament, not the before Jesus Christ, the old Jewish part of the Bible, it's Jehovah was the name for God. And it says Jehovah is a jealous God. You say, well, God's jealous. Well, yes, God is jealous in the sense that God is waiting for us and looking to see, what do we love most? Do we love God or do we love other things? And is God going to come to us when our heart is chasing after all these other beautiful things in the world? No, God's jealous. And that's the sense, what it means when God's a jealous God. It's not jealous of other gods, except to the fact that materialism is a God itself. Emotional, outward hedonism is a God to some people. Possessions is a god to some people. All of these things, those are the gods that Jehovah was speaking about, those sorts of things. But they need not be there. Now, John, I'm going to finish actually with just a little story also, a little something that occurred to me that, in the Mahabharata, the characters all are symbolic. And Draupadi is the character that is symbolic of dispassion. And now it's a long story, and I think most of you know the story, but maybe not the symbolism of it. And Lahiri Mahashai, this was his great contribution to the revival of the Bhagavad Gita in the 19th century, the Bengal Renaissance, the Calcutta Renaissance at that time, when all those great souls revived so much of the tradition in those days. But anyway, he said Draupadi was symbolizing dispassion. And Draupadi had two children, Draupadi and Drishtadyumna. Drishtadyumna. That's a mouthful for us Westerners. And Draupadi, of course, represents that inner fire of Kundalini, that energy. And Drishtadyumna represents that calm inner light. And you could say they're the progeny of dispassion, that inner fire and that calm inner light, which is really the spiritual eye. That calm inner light are the result, are the children of dispassion. And so they, of course, are representative of why the Pandavas won the battle. Draupadi is, of course, that fire of Kundalini. And who was Drishtadyumna was the general of the Pandava, in charge of the Pandava army. Well, it's an interesting concept, but this is the solution that the saint comes to. The suffering we feel in life, that's but a veil over the joy that is behind us. Don't be fooled by the veil. I know it's difficult. All of us suffer. I suffer. You suffer. This is the nature of this reality. The Buddha came to share ways to overcome suffering. To overcome suffering, though, the antidote to suffering is joy. The antidote to suffering is that inner light. The antidote to suffering is God's bliss, God's joy, and God's presence. And the message to us is get a taste of what those are. If we taste it, you see, if you really taste something that's really good, then of course it makes it much easier for you to choose it. But in conclusion, remember, you have to choose. It's not going to be chosen for you. And this choice is being made moment by moment by moment. This satsang's over, you're going to go out the door today or tomorrow, and you're going to run into a situation. How are you going to react? That choice is before you in every moment. You have to choose God, but that's a little, large. Choose joy. Choose that things that are going to take you in that direction of joy. Or at least put a fence around you and don't go in that direction and then call to God. God, don't tempt me, give me strength. Light the fire, Divine Mother, of your love, your joy in my heart. And it's a daily struggle. I know that's the Mahabharata. That's the Bhagavad Gita right there every day in what we do. So God bless all of you, and I wish you, and I hope you bless me too, and wish me the success in every day in this struggle that we're facing in life. But I feel confident because you get that taste and you know that it's just a matter, just keep on pulling that string. You don't know how, or that nail. Swami Kriyananda used to say, you don't know how deep that nail is in the board. You just got to keep tugging it until finally it comes out. Don't give up. So blessings to all of you. I promised I would stay for questions and answers too, and I ended up speaking a little longer than I meant to. But if you're okay with a little longer time here, I'm okay too. So I'd like to open it up if anybody has some questions, and please feel free. And I could, Diti, you could be the moderator here. Calling or picking people, and I'm going to put my speaker or thing here more on the gallery view, and so I can see. And if you're going to ask a question, you have to turn your video on. If I can't see who you are, I'm not going to answer.
Thank you, first of all, Jayaji. I just want to say what a beautiful prayer that you led us with. Just want to go back to the recording and maybe write that down. It's such a beautiful prayer we started with, and a beautiful satsang. And the heart center feels very touched by the satsang. And I just, I think someone wrote in the chat that Dr. Nirmal Lodev has questions. So maybe we will start.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Let me read here. Okay. Is this the one? Can we be happy while having feelings of sadness? Like moving out of home city? Oh, yeah. Actually, that's an interesting point. Very good question. Excellent question, because yes, we can. Yes, we can. And I've noticed this, and I think you're noticing it yourself, because you probably wouldn't answer, or maybe I hope you've noticed it, because I suspect you may or not have, you would write this question because of some intuitive sense in yourself that yes, we live on multiple levels. Isn't that? I mean, we don't live just, I suspect everybody's this way. I mean, I live on different levels. And I suspect we all do. There's what's going on here in the daily things of going on. And then there's another deep ocean underneath it all. And we're in both at the same time. And the question is, and I think we're aware of them both at the same time. And I think as we progress along in our spiritual journey, that awareness of these different levels of simultaneous existence becomes stronger, and our identification with the waves is dominant but then slowly we realize there's also this deep ocean of calmness, of stillness within us, and we slowly begin to transfer our center of our awareness to the deep ocean. But that doesn't mean that we've abandoned the day-to-day as well. Look at Master was an avatar. Master was a realized soul. And he would say that he could never be in the presence, or Divine Mother always arranged it so that he was not in the presence of his loved ones when they passed. And this was throughout his whole life. Like when his brother passed, he was elsewhere. It was when his sister passed, and one of his sisters, he was on his trip to Japan in the early days. And when his disciples would pass, Gyanamata, he says he couldn't be there. He had to take a drive. He says because Divine Mother knew his heart would be so touched and sad that he would argue with Divine Mother and not allow that person to be taken, and so you could see, now how is it possible a great master, he's sad and he's weeping for the transient passing of a dear soul, but yet he's omnipresent in a layer of his self is omnipresent beyond it. He says like, the little bubble of laughter, I have become the sea of mirth itself in his poem Samadhi. So he sees himself this little, and then he also says in that poem, I, the cosmic sea, watch the little ego floating in me. So the ego doesn't disappear. It's only that the awareness of ourselves as the cosmic self begins to grow and become reality within ourselves. Swami Kriyananda once, I remember him years ago, when I first met him, he had, it was in the 1960s actually, long time ago, and he had been parted from Self-Realization Fellowship in the early 1960s, and it was a very, very painful moment in his life, time in his life, traumatic for him actually. It created a lot of doubts in himself, and it took him years to come to a reconciliation in his mind about that. But he said, looking back, this was years later when he said this, he said, looking back on it, it was interesting. He said it was interesting to him because he felt such pain. And the pain was, he thought, well, maybe Master is displeased with me. And he said that was very painful for him. He said, but the interesting thing was, he said he knew also on a deep level, there was also, he never lost touch with a feeling of joy. And so he was on two levels simultaneously. There was joy on one level. He knew that joy was there somewhere, but it became buried a little bit, covered over, and the pain was there too. Or you could say it's like the drilling at the dentist. It's not that the pain wasn't there. That's the waves. He retreated from the waves into the deep stillness of the ocean. You see, and then he watched. Now, that's, if we've never had that experience, that's hard to imagine in a way. We'd have to, but I think your answer here is an excellent one, or a question is an excellent one, because this is because it's not either or, you see, and it's not that we lose our humanity. In the saints are all very much characters, I guess you would say. Some of them very unusual characters, but they don't lose their humanity. They don't lose their ability. A yogi does not lose his or her ability to feel. You see, it's just that they're not dominated by those feelings of outward, if it's outward feelings, pleasure, pain, sadness, the duality of life. They're aware of it. That's how they can empathize with other people, and because they know what it's like to feel pain, and they know what it's like to feel sadness. But the person in ego consciousness does not know what the yogi knows, the saint knows, because that saint knows also the deeper level of joy of God's presence that is far more dominant once one is experienced. So that's what the worldly person doesn't know. That the saint knows both and can see them in proper proportion. So I think that's a very good question. I like that one. Okay. Okay. Well, I'll go this next one here. What if people around us have no joy? Does it affect our progress? I would never say people have no joy. They just don't manifest it yet, because the potential for joy is in everybody. It's all on a spectrum, you might say. It's like joy is God. You could say that if you understand what's being said there. So it's there. It just doesn't manifest very much, or it's hidden. You might say it's hidden by darkness and covered over. So I think our joy is a way to be able to help those people, because joy is an antidote. People who are not in joy tend to want to pull you down. And that's, I think, what your question is going toward here, because they want you to be in their aura as much as you would maybe like to get them out of their aura into a better one. They too want to pull you into their vision of reality. And that's a kind of a natural thing in life. A person wants other people to see life through their eyes and their own vision. And this is the problem with being around negative people, because from their frame of reference, whatever negativity, where they're directing it, it makes perfect sense. I should be negative. Wouldn't you be negative too? And they want you to see life that way. And when you get into their aura too closely, you say, yeah, that I guess really life is dark and painful and people are terrible. And, if you allow yourself to get into their reality. And so that is the thing to caution around people that are dark, negative, have no joy, is you'll get sucked into their reality if you're not strong enough to keep your own reality. So you do. This is why the yogis say environment is stronger than willpower. So we have to use due caution. Now, we can't always do that. I mean, circumstances, we live in this life of circumstances, and we're forced by circumstances to be in the company of people who maybe have a purpose of wanting us to go on that level when we don't want to. Well, we have to do our best, and that's you could say the art of the strategy of living. You can always try to create a bubble around yourself of joyfulness, but practical things are to, you have to be practical. A little thing that is Yogananda said, do try to create a bubble of joy around yourself. Your aura, is if you're magnetic and your will is strong, it'll overcome the will of somebody else who's trying to pull you into negativity. He says, but it's a test of magnetism. The stronger magnet will win. So be careful. Putting yourself in the company of a very strong negative magnet will tend to pull you in that direction. So it's true. Don't look into the eyes of somebody who's very negative, an angry, negative person, unless you're very, very sure and confident that your magnetism is a lot stronger. So, like, consequently, if let's say a child, you're a mother, father, and your child is in a negative mood, if you're a parent, you know what I mean. I'm a parent. My daughter's grown, but when she was little, if she got into a really negative mood, you speak to her, and then you look directly into their eyes. You see, it's rather than I'm looking over here, you can't do that. You look right, because the assumption here is the parent's magnetism is stronger than that child, you see. And the magnetism will be transferred from the strong magnet to the weak magnet. Later on, when you're with loved ones, usually your heart you can still do that with family, loved ones. But with other people you don't know, be careful. So there are things, keeping them. You have to. Then again, you have no choice in the circumstances. Well, what's your armor? God is your armor. Guru is your armor. Look into your spiritual eye. If you have to confront somebody, don't look in their eyes, but look here at their spiritual eye. Because sometimes if you're not talking to them directly, it's not going to be a good communication. But don't look in the eyes. Look here, up toward their spiritual eye, and project. You see, we're talking about will here. The stronger will can easily overcome a weak will, and there are, unfortunately, this world is filled with people of strong negative will. So we have to be practical in our idealism. So I'm going to go to the next one. How can I be part of the satsang meetings in future? Well, I'm going to give that one over to Diti. That's a practical one. I don't have all these things at my fingertips. And she's going to answer you at Susmita. You answer Susmita afterwards, and she'll be able to help her. Do we have any others?
Yes, Jayadi, we have Dr. Nirmalu Dev who wants to, I think, ask the question verbally. So Nirmalodev, can you please unmute yourself and just one by one ask?
Okay, where are we? Yeah, where are? Oh, okay, there you are. Okay.
Yeah. Good evening. Nice meeting you after a long time. Nice meeting everyone. And thank you for the wonderful satsang. I think I've derived a lot of inspiration, this was very absorbing. So I've derived a lot of answers to my questions, which I was just seething inside me. So it's a wonderful experience to be with you after a long time. And although I have a few questions lined up, but the thing is that the duality, that struck me. Yes, there is no duality in nature. There's only one that we have to realize. Correct me if I'm wrong. So my first question, we have three questions lined up. So the first question is, how do we connect to God in situations which are very adverse? Being a surgeon, I am sometimes faced with patients who are in dire circumstances. Then I have to explain to everyone there's a lot of negativity around. Sometimes I do a surgery and I feel I'm not happy. So those things they sink in and they attract. Because I am very passionate towards my work. So how do I overcome these adverse circumstances, this kind of situations, and this kind of situation? How can I be happy? How can I connect to God and feel that whatever I've done was to the best of my ability? That's my first question to you.
Let me answer that one before you go on, or else I'll forget. I'll get absorbed in two and three. I often, when I speak on this topic, I like to use the example of a doctor, a surgeon. How can the surgeon cut somebody, and yet be dispassionate or detached enough to be able to do that without themselves taking on some of the pain or the response? And I said, and I've often said, we need to have a surgeon must have learned this to some degree to be able to be a surgeon, to be what you are. But I can empathize because obviously this is a continual learning process. I also use the example of people who are they're EMTs, they call them in America, emergency medical technicians, who go out, first responders when there's a traffic accident or something like that, stabilizing the patient. And I said, an EMT, we need to, it has to be first an emergency responder to an emergency. They're not an emergency reactor to the emergency. You don't react, and you want to respond. And a response, of course, means that you are conscious. You're not subconscious. You're not reacting from the subconscious parts of your emotional brain. You're acting from, you might say, the more forefront of your brain, to be conscious of yourself as present. And when we do that, in a sense, what we do when we meditate is we're transferring our attention away from the primal brain into the forefront of the brain, that element that allows us, that's associated with responsiveness rather than with reaction to that limbic fear, flight, those sorts of reactions. And so to be able to train ourselves to be able to do that and bring our attention to the point between the eyebrows makes us, you might say, remove that sense of ego I. You're able to observe, to be the observer of what's going on. And to the degree I would suspect a doctor has to hold in check their emotions, but that itself could probably be draining because you're holding that emotional reaction in check. But you, in a sense, I think somebody like a surgeon is a person who is forced to learn, or else I don't think you could survive as a surgeon or for a long period of time. Or a doctor, at any sense of being able to approach people dispassionately in that way. But I think you, to be successful, I would imagine a surgeon puts their attention, does not suppress the emotion. I don't think that's a successful way. Now, that could be one way a person could survive. And I think we find ourselves, and this is where it transcends being a doctor or a surgeon, in life in general, to succeed, we suppress our feelings. And that would cause any kind of suppression causes a rebound if we're not able to, because when we no longer can do it, they rebound, and it's less successful than being able to transcend, let's say, is a better word, to be able to transcend the emotions. And you could say it goes back to this quality of being able to work in life on multiple levels at the same time. We're not simply our emotion, like a child is all emotional reaction to something happens. As we mature, we get to the point where we're able to see, oh, I can choose. That it's the power of choice, that I can choose to not be emotional. I can choose something else. Now, what we choose, of course, is a mark of wisdom, and because people make bad choices, you see, we have to realize. But we learn, but at least if we have a power, we say, I'm going to choose and do something, is better than totally being no impulse control at all. So we have to develop that quality of, I think in your case, or anybody's case, being conscious. Now, once we're conscious, that's not the end of the road, but it's a good start, because we then have to, one, make wise choices, and those choices have to be, we can then take the next level and say, can I choose to bring into my heart godly feelings? Or superconscious feelings, which are peace, let's say, or can I bring calmness? Can I bring joy into it? And I think really the only way you can do this is you have to learn to recognize them in yourself, is to recognize what still calmness feels like. And then you learn to by practice, you learn to access it. And not simply suppress, you see, put it aside. But I guess there is a certain element that you do have to put your feelings on the shelf for a while. But that's not the same as suppressing them. You see, it's putting your attention where the attention needs to be. And then, of course, I would say if you want to keep a balanced life, you have to then take those feelings off the shelf and reintegrate with them, or else you're going to become perhaps an unpleasant life unpleasant surgeon when you go home. So you have to become the devotee that you are. But there's no one answer to this. But I think this is why you meditate, why you practice, why you gain control of your process, of your feelings. And the first thing is awareness precedes control. So the first thing is you have to become aware of yourself, but also aware of these other potentials within yourself. And then from awareness comes control. And that control comes through practice. And it's all also related. Remember, the will is involved in this. It's you have to develop your, and it's not will of ego will, it's the will to be able to control yourself. And I think a surgeon probably cannot be a good surgeon unless you have that. And the fact that you're a devotee practicing these teachings probably tells me you're probably a good surgeon. So certainly you have the emotional potential skills to be one.
Thank you. Feeling blessed. So coming back to that's wonderfully answered. Coming back to next questions, what are the signs that you are actually aware you are making progress in the spiritual path, and you're slowly developing dispassion, as you mentioned?
I think
in your speech. And
okay, I think now that's a big question. I could take a long time with it. I'm just going to keep it simple, but realizing with this, there's a lot more that could be said. So, because otherwise I think there's a few things. After I said I'm going to do one, but the fruit of your spiritual development is the growth of your intuition. your intuitive ability is the tool that allows you to experience these deeper realities of deep spiritual peace, not just the sensation of distraction, but the sense of joyfulness that comes behind that positive side of feeling peace or calmness, a sense of that feeling of expansion that comes, that sense of knowing. It's not intellectual. And that sense of knowing and the sense of joy, those all come with the growth of your intuition. That sense of a direct perception of reality without the use of the mind or the intellect. You just perceive it. And that begins to grow. And it's difficult to explain to somebody what intuition is. But you just know, you just feel it, you know it. It's intuition. There's two kinds of intuition. Intuition of the mind, like Einstein perceiving relativity intuitively, maybe on our own level. And the other one is intuition of the heart. You just know, your heart knows. And those things begin to grow. And I think also the fact of you're making progress in the spiritual line is your ability to feel and project that, a growing sense of calmness and kindness, compassion toward others. Which is a recognition that your ego sense of I is being moderated to the degree that you can expand your awareness of the reality of other people, the people around you. So how do you say that? Compassion, empathy, the sense of other people exist in this world besides myself. All of those things, which are absolutely critical for a doctor. Now, I have heard it said, because you're a surgeon, I'll mention this, and I don't know if it's true, but I have heard that some surgeons, the only way they survive is they turn off the empathy meter, and they're not empathetic, because empathy, it means relating to the reality of other people, and they find that if they relate to the reality of other people, it's too difficult for them. And that's, of course, I don't know if that's true, but they say some surgeons don't become empathetic because it's a danger to them. Now, that's a lack of spiritual development. And so if you want to be a good surgeon and a devotee, and I think it's a wonderful experimental laboratory that you're in, you need to have both of those. You see, you have to feel that, you have to have empathy and reality. In other words, the ability to relate to other people's realities in a positive way, kindly, with heart. But also, that other side as well, your intuitive ability and ability to do your job well. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. I couldn't have asked for more. I mean, wonderful answers. It brings back to my final question. Sorry for lots of hands raised. So being absorbed in work, being absorbed in your work, being passionate about work and spiritual pathways. When you're absorbed in your work, sometimes you are not concentrating on the spiritual pathway. They seem to diverge, only when you are still, you seem to be absorbing the greatest consciousness that you have inside you, the God feeling inside you. So how do I link these two?
Well, now you're speaking for every man and woman here with that one, because this is the balance between being in the world and doing your absolute very best. You cannot be successful in the spiritual life unless you're able to engage successfully and focusedly in the material life. It's not about putting the material life aside. Now, I don't mean this materially outwardly in terms of riches or things like that, but being good at, if you have a skill, doing good at it and doing your very, very best, being in the world, but not of the world, you see. You're not, at the same time, it's also, I guess it's that two sides. We're talking about the deep self and the waves. Now, we say, I don't want to be having anything to do with the waves, but we'll think riding the waves as a surfboard rider, a surfer, that's pleasurable for the surfer. And so consequently, we want to be able to surf the waves successfully and have fun at it too, I hope, and joyfully. I don't know if surgeons have joyful experiences in that way, but but I think you understand what I'm trying to say. But at the other side, we also have the other side, and we realize it's only the waves, and the surfboard rider knows when he gets on that board, 9 times out of 10, he's going to crash. But he does it again. And he goes till finally he becomes good at it. And so consequently, we are in this world, and this world is not meant for us to hang our heads and be gloomy. It's, Yogananda certainly was not like that. He would, remember that story when some of the disciples came back late at night up to the ashram, and the ashram was on a hilltop, you see, overlooking Los Angeles. And they saw Master was out on the grass, the lawn, and he was in a state of ecstasy. And they went up to him, and he says, and he was looking at the lights of the city, and he says, "It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful." Now he was seeing probably more than the lights of Los Angeles, but he says, "It's so beautiful." It's just, and he was just in ecstasy, enjoying the beauty. But it was the natural world, but it was also the inner world. It stimulated. And that's how he was expansive, you see, in his enjoyment. And of course, from that enjoyment, the natural next step is you want to enjoy it with others too. You want to share it with other people. And I think to keep that expansive consciousness is a recognition of how the Guru's path was. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't be seclusive also. That's a valid way. And Master had that side of him too. But to be sharing with other people and to see what you're doing as something it's not you that's doing, it's God's talent. That is, you're borrowing for a moment, you might say. And if you're going to borrow something, you want to take care of it and use it well and do it well. Because, have you ever noticed this? If you take, I notice this as, maybe I'm reading, and I say reading the newspaper. I don't read the newspaper anymore. I don't think many of us do. But I used to read the newspaper, and there's a section where they used to have these little puzzles. This one little, Times of India, there's these little puzzle sections. Yeah, the crossword or the word puzzle or whatever, number puzzle, Sudoku or some puzzle. I used to always stop and I'd kind of fill the puzzle in. And I'd kind of, put it, but sometimes the puzzle, I couldn't solve the darn thing. And it used to kind of frustrate me. And I'd say, I'm not going to leave here until I solve this. Unless I could solve it, I felt I had to come back to it. And I think life is kind of like that. Unless we can do it successfully to our satisfaction, even if we didn't solve it, I did my best. I did my best. Some things are not solvable, on the worldly level, perhaps, but I did my best. And I think that's all we can really ask for. And so then you can leave it behind. Otherwise, you don't solve it, you're going to maybe come back to it.
That's what the next, I guess.
Yeah, you want to keep coming back as a surgeon? I don't know. Maybe until finally you say, I've had enough. Okay. Let's move on to the next thing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. I think I can only answer one more because I just got a low battery warning on my computer. So anyway, I have 7%. And so one more question.
Jayaji, you have the group very engaged. We have 3 raised hands. So whoever can go first.
Well,
we give a chance to somebody who has not asked a
question. No, you pick. I don't want to be the one to pick.
Okay, I'll pick Ayan, and the reason being he hasn't asked any questions so far and he has his video on.
Oh, yes. See, right. Shubha has her video closed, so she doesn't get to answer the question. So, okay, go ahead.
Well, thank you so much. I have known happiness peace, frustration, sadness, anger, everything. But I have not been introduced to God. I do not know who God is and how to love God. Here we are talking about loving God, following God. But how would I know God? Would Kriya Yoga
Well,
introduce me to God?
okay, let me back up because I need to give a fast answer here before I go blackout here.
I got it.
You know, you said you experienced love.
Yes.
Well, somewhere behind that love, maybe God is hiding. Maybe God is in that love. You said you knew peace. Maybe God is hiding in that peace. You don't, those are doorways, and you have to open those doorways to see what's behind them. And I think Swamiji liked to give this definition of God to a person who was total atheist, and the atheist asked, "Well, what? How do I know? Well, how I don't believe in God? What do you say to me?" And Swamiji said to him, "Well, why don't you think of God as your highest potential? What could you become at your very, very highest potential?" And the man thought about that. He says, "Well, that's pretty good. I'm going to try that." And but in the sense, I don't think any of us, God cannot be known. There's a phrase in the Bible, God cannot be known. And people take that, they say, well, I can't know God. That's not the same thing. God cannot be known. What that means is God cannot be known by the human mind. We have to experience God. So consequently, we have to transcend this human vision of this world of duality. We're in this world of likes and dislikes, of ups and downs. There's something beyond that. And the potential is there beyond that. So God can be known, but it's only when we transcend this reality of suffering, you might say, or the any ignorance, which is the lack of knowledge of reality, then we will really know God. God will introduce himself to us at that time. So what we're talking about, I think, when we say casually to know God, is to think in terms of the feelings, the love, and expand that. What would love be like if I could expand that love and see that love in other people, to see that love as universally? Think in terms of joy. What is joy? Now, I think we've all felt happy. You felt happiness at some time in your life. Is that happiness is conditional on circumstances often. Can you feel happy irregardless of the circumstances? And what does that feel like? What does happiness feel like in your heart? Can you summon that up because of whatever the circumstances are? That's possible. I mean, I can feel that at times, and if I come real calm, I can stimulate that feeling, and it's a little bit. Well, if you can get even a little bit of that, then you can start to, it's like a little fire, you go camping and you create a little fire in the forest. And, as you're a kid, so we did this. And then what do you have to do? You have to puff on it, because the embers, and you start puffing on it and the fire begins to grow. So in the same, our little bit of feeling of love or devotion or calmness, we feel it, and then we puff on it. But that's what we do when we meditate. And isn't it so? It's something like that. And so you have to try to you can't feel it at first because there's too many distractions. There's so much tumult going on. It's hard to, in the middle of all this movement, to focus on anything. And so that's why we start very simply by sitting still, watch the breath. And the first thing when you watch the breath, in between those pauses in the breath, you're going to get a moment of when things are still. And then slowly you start to feel, oh, that feels good. And then start puffing on it. And in time, you'll find that some of these other things begin to grow. You come out of meditation in the middle of a day, you just feel joyful for no reason at all. Watch for those moments. You just feel a little bit of kindness and compassion for somebody. No reason, it's just spontaneous. And then pay attention, puff on them, and they'll begin to grow. Now, I'm down to 2%. So I think what's going to
Thank you
happen
so
here,
much for your answer.
we're
You
gonna be
inspired me
going here,
very
and I'm
much.
going to disappear. So I want to thank all of you for being here while I still have the 2%. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. It's my pleasure to be here with you, and I hope, that you can invite me back again in the future someday, and we'll come back and I'll answer. You're going to have to write down those questions, and I'm going to have to come back at another time. But I'll keep going until this thing. What's going to happen? I don't mean to be rude, but what's going to happen? It's just going to go black, and that means my battery ran out. So one more question.
Jayaji, we also, before that question, want to say big thank you and just feel so much love and gratitude with this satsang. And we will have you back soon, very soon again for Kolkata. You have to. We'll go to the next question and just see how much that can be answered.
Okay.
Shubha Bhattacharji has a question.
Okay.
Good evening. I am totally overjoyed. Actually, I'm basically a beginner, you can say, and I'm trying to embark on the spiritual lines. So this was quite uplifting and enriching for me. See, I don't have a lot of time for the questions because
1%. I'm at 1%.
1%. Yeah. So I am not coming to any questions. But I was a little bit in a dilemma regarding the understanding of God, because as per my understanding,